And then we also have with that, I think we just want
Bailey, you're muted.
Oh, okay.
Welcome back.
I was just going, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, so I don't even know. I guess I've been muted for that whole time. I just said we're going to get started. The people that are on the phone, we're not going to have a lot of slides or anything like that, and so you're not really going to be missing much beyond just videos of people. And so I have one slide that I want to start with, and that's just basically going over the Volkswagen settlement. And so people that are on Teams and can see it, that's great, but we're going to be going over it verbally as well, and then we'll send out this information. This is just important just because of this is why all these conversations are coming up, essentially, just because this funding is here. So just as a background for everyone that people are not aware of yet, sorry, my dog is active right now. Let me just go ahead and share my PowerPoint. And so can everyone see that here?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to go ahead, go for it. And so basically,
We can see it.
Perfect. Funding for EV infrastructure, the Volkswagen Settlement Mitigation Action Plan, the ZEV investment, that infrastructure funding is out right now. It's been out for a few months now, just very recently being released after lots of talk for a long time. And so a lot of people are excited to jump on it. It funds the purchase and installation of new level 2 charging equipment. And there's $10.4 million available in grant funding that will go for reimbursements of up to $2,500 per installation. Grants are first come, first serve basis and cannot exceed 70% for publicly available EV chargers, as well as 60% for workplace or multi-unit dwelling. And those workplace multi-unit dwelling do not have to be accessible. They can be behind a wall or a gate or anything like that. And so that's what we're really focusing on today with this funding, because it is first come, first serve. And as a selfish thing for our region, we want as many people to apply as early and as possible, so we can get as much of the funding as possible, just because it does not have a geographic allocation of funds. But just as a little update about when and how much has been allocated thus far, of the 10.465 million that have been allocated for this funding, you have until technically September 9th, 2021, or until funds run out, whichever comes first, which is why we want people to apply early. But only around 330,000 have been requested thus far as of the last update that they have released from TCEQ. And so that is something that we are happy about, but we also want to make that number go up a lot more really quick. And so when you see on the right side the distribution of where people have applied thus far, there's really no major outlier. DFW has had the most applicants so far, but that's not that much of funding, so that doesn't really say much. And then the bottom is the composition of what the applicants have been applying for. So around 41% have been public, 26% have been multi-unit dwellings, and then around 33% of the applicants have been workplace. I don't think that any of these funds have actually been awarded yet. These are just requested funds, and so that is something to take into account as well. But in this conversation, I wanted to kind of field questions, figure stuff out for people that are trying to navigate, to try to jump in on this funding first, to try to get kind of firsthand best practices. What are the first steps you should take, kind of how to even navigate this world, just because it is so new and it's so changing. And so we just want to get kind of that background and allow people to kind of have a safe space to really be able to talk one-on-one with people and get that kind of peer-to-peer resource going. And so two of the people that we talked to before this to try to kind of get some stories and background of people within North Texas that have had a lot of infrastructure already kind of in place, and their story is both the city of Irving as well as DFW Airport. And so Emily and Zoe are going to give a little background of kind of what they have gone through and kind of their kind of updates on where they're at. And so we thought that was a good first step. And then anyone who's new to the kind of world of EVSE can definitely start fielding some questions, but we can kind of go from there. So Emily, if you kind of want to go and kind of say kind of what Irving's done, that'd be great.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. It's Emily Asbury, Environmental Programs Coordinator with the City of Irving. My supervisor, Melissa, the Public Works Manager, is also on the line. So yeah, like Bailey mentioned, we've had EV chargers for a while now. Originally, we got them from the Department of Energy Eco-Tality program that I think, several other cities here had as well. So that came from a grant, so there wasn't any original cost. But, our public loves having them. We love having them. We have 10 total between City Hall, our West Irving Library, and our Convention Center. And we get comments sometimes from people, will you have them? So we definitely had a feeling that we want to keep them and keep it going. So with this most recent RFP, we had a couple of goals in mind. So with our last contract, we got revenue, but it was very small, pretty negligible. And so when we were negotiating this time, in our RFP, we wanted to make sure that we had options. So we asked for a couple different options from, the various companies. So such as if we were to totally buy them, own them completely, all under us, if it was a partial ownership, or if the company itself owned and operated it. So we wanted different options to see what would work best for us. And when we got them back, honestly, a lot of them were very expensive. They were requesting that we got all new equipment, full new conduit, et cetera, which we knew our council wouldn't like because we originally got them with no cost. We didn't, want to all of a sudden say they were going to be very expensive. So we ended up negotiating, and what worked best for us was that we have Blink, and they fully own and operate. So that wasn't, while it's not the most ideal situation, it's what worked best for us and has been working best for us because we knew that we didn't want to pay, and we knew that we didn't want to be putting a lot of energy into maintaining them too. Our electricians would not thank us for that. So that's what ended up working best for us. But I'd say, the biggest things to keep in mind while you're doing your RFP is know what your goals are, know what your timeline is. Is your city one that wants to put in a lot of new chargers? Is yours one that wants to kind of keep what you have and then grow from there? We also definitely recommend negotiating. Like we said, you can, have some back and forth. And then also make sure that you leave leeway if in the future you want to put in additional chargers. So we ended up doing our RFP at the end of 2018, going into 2019, but we knew that we wanted a fast charger, and that's not something that came back in our RFP. It wasn't going to work out this time. So we made sure that we had something in there that made sure if a grant came out for a fast charger that we'd be able to have one, without conflict. So I definitely make sure to keep that in there, especially with the Volkswagen grants, coming out. And one last thing on the topic of fast chargers, like I said, we tried to get one in our RFP, but it was too expensive and it wasn't going to work out. But we did end up negotiating that one of our level 2s is higher. I don't remember the exact amps right now, but it is stronger and a little bit faster. And so that's the only cost we had, is having to put in additional conduit to accommodate that faster charger. But like I mentioned, we'd love to have a fast charger one day. That's kind of our next goal. So hopefully with the Volkswagen grant, that's going to come about. But yeah, that was kind of our process this time around. If anyone has any questions.
Yeah, so with your RFP, how did you guys start that? Did you guys get a sample RFP from someone else first, or did you guys just start that immediately in-house?
Yeah, so we had the RFP from the last time we had done it, which was before my time. I started actually only a couple months before this RFP in 2018. So we had the one from before, and we kind of just made some adjustments. Like I said, keeping in mind what our goals were. We knew we wanted a fast charger, so we made sure to include that as, is that something you could put in? We wanted, like I said, different options. So when they originally made that RFP, You know, I'm not sure which resources they use, but I definitely was looking all over, you know, your COG website and everything. That's something I would definitely recommend, is using your resources that you have available, like Bailey and Lori. They're great resources. And I'm pretty sure I reached out to you guys back when we were doing it. So it definitely helps to have others, you know, to bounce off of.
Yeah. And so with that administrative side, I think that a lot of people are anticipating that to be a barrier. And so did you guys have, I know you came in after the initial round that you guys originally did with an RFP, but how did Irving come about saying they wanted it? How was that pushed and how was that navigated at the beginning to try to get that administrative support in order to kind of make that initial step?
Sure. Do you mean back the original grant with the DOE, or this time around?
I just mean in general, just like city council approval. How did the city get kind of on board with that, especially doing it as one of the first cities kind of moving forward with it? How was it brought up and how was it kind of sold to get kind of the movement forward for it?
Sure. Well, I think definitely the fact that it came from a grant, so it didn't cost, that helped a lot, you know, of course. And then I think also just, you know, the idea of having chargers in general can help. It sounds a little corny, but it helps make your city look forward thinking, you know, innovative. That's something kind of exciting to see, especially at our West Irving Library. We have solar panels there. It also uses geothermal energy. It's like a, you know, overall environmentally friendly building. So as we install chargers, and it kind of helps, you know, with that image of forward thinking, futuristic, that sort of thing. And like I said, you know, at this point, I don't think our council would want us to take it away because we're so used to having it there now. And we do have people that use it, you know, on a pretty regular basis. So our public's used to it, our council is used to it, our employees are used to it. And I think we like having that. And like I said, we'd like to have more in the future, more fast chargers. It's kind of an exciting thing, so.
For sure. Do you guys have a process on how you choose different locations or how you kind of create that hierarchy of what locations you will invest in first? Or how was that determined?
Sure, that's a good question. I don't know if Melissa has any insight on the original location choices, because like I said, I wasn't there for that. But I think, like I said, West Irving Library already kind of fit with what that building was going for. I think they were installed right around when the building was built, if I remember correctly. And then City Hall, of course, you know, being the central hub of everything, made a lot of sense. And we do get people in and out often. Our City Hall is also across the street from one of our other libraries, a very popular one, the South Library. So, you know, you can also park it there to walk across the street to the library. So that was a good location. And then, of course, our convention center, because we get people, you know, from all over visiting, coming to conventions, coming to concerts, coming to, you know, all sorts of things here in Irving. So that was a good location for visibility and for people, you know, coming back and forth. So that was kind of a good, you know, place to put them. But of course, think of places sense. You know, where are people going to be able to park, you know, for 30 minutes, an hour, whatever, get something done, not just sitting in their car. So that's why I think a library is a really good option, because if people are coming to browse through the books for a little while, you know, it's a good place to just park and get your charging done. But think about it in that way, I would say, where you're going to get the most usage. If you're putting them somewhere where people don't ever go except for, you know, your own employees, you might not get a lot of usage. So I think that's an important thing to remember.
Does anyone else have any questions for Emily or anything that the city of Irving potentially did? I know that there's a few people that have put in the chat that they'd be interested in seeing your RFP. And I know you've shared it with us before and a few individuals, but we can discuss that offline. But if that's something the city of Irving would be willing to share, I think that would definitely be a resource for many people.
Hey, Bailey, it's Kathy Fonville.
Hi.
So Emily, I'm sorry I had to take a call right in the middle of your presentation. Did y'all end up contracting with Blink, since that's the equipment you had? Is that where is it, and it's just charging as a service? You don't own the infrastructure, correct?
Right, yeah, and we do have Blink, and that's actually who we had previously. We did get up, I will say we got responses from a few different, entities, but that's the one that made the most sense for what we were doing. But yeah, we have Blink right now.
And do you have any kind of revenue share agreement with Blink?
Not we had previously, but like I mentioned, it was negligible. So, but yeah, not this time. It just kind of worked out for us the best way for them to fully own and operate.
And are you paying for the electricity?
That's a good question.
That's where the the real money comes in. It's like if you're paying for the electricity because you're providing it for service for your residents, sometimes that can, council's not going to want to do that long term if it's really costing you a lot of money. Anyway, I just want to know if you were doing that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll have to look back at our contract because I remember discussing that, but I don't remember how that ended up shaking out. But that's a good question and an important thing to consider.
Yeah, and Monday just asked in the chat, how did you determine the charging rate for users? Was that just within the contract of what people kind of proposed, or how did you guys negotiate that?
Yeah, for ours, because like I said, they fully own and operate, we don't have a say in it. But I have seen other, setups where you do determine how much, but in ours, that's up to the company themselves.
Great. So I think we're going to jump to Zoe with DFW Airport. It's a very different scale of how many chargers that they are trying to install in parking garages and things like that, but still very relevant. And so Zoe, if you kind of want to give a breakdown kind of what DFW has done and kind of how you guys have navigated and tried to figure out how many stations and all, that would be awesome.
Sure, thanks, Bailey. So I've been at the airport coming up on 2 years. So I haven't been here that long, and I know the first chargers that were installed, I believe, were in 2016, 2015, 2016 timeframe, and those were only in our garages. We have a total of 26 in our garages. 3 of those are actually Tesla chargers, so we were not very involved in procuring or doing anything related to those chargers, but the other 23 were all through TERP grants, and they're all semi-connect chargers. So that was before I came, and then right when I had started at the airport, we had just finished commissioning 4 additional chargers at our new headquarters building, and those are ChargePoint chargers, 3 level 2s and 1 fast charger. And as of late, we got an FAA grant to install 4 additional level 1 chargers for some all electric vehicles that we're adding to our fleet. And then we did a TERP application. It was actually 5 different applications because for TERP, they wanted a different application for every location we had around the airport. And altogether, I believe we were awarded all of the money we asked for with those applications, and it ends up being about 54 chargers. So we have 54 new level 2 chargers that we need to install in the next 3 years. And that process is a little bit overwhelming. We did not think we would get awarded all of the chargers that we had requested. But we're actively working now to start the RFP process. And something we've learned having 2 different chargers, the semi-connect and the ChargePoint, the operational scheme of it is very different. The customer service is very different. We really like ChargePoint. And because we have to go out for bid for, as part of the grant requirements for both FAA and TERP, you have to be very particular about how you word your RFP so that you can almost guarantee that you will get the charger company that you would like. So it's a lot of wordsmithing because we're not super happy with the semi-connect and we would like to maintain ChargePoint moving forward. And there's a lot more flexibility in terms of kind of queuing people. If you have ChargePoint, you can the people who are parked there can get a notification that they need to move, and then there's next in line that can move in. So things like that. It's a lot more dynamic than the semi-connect ones. In terms of our maintenance of them, so we are actually kind of it kind of came to fruition recently because all of the chargers are now out of warranty. Their warranty is expired, and so now when there's issues, everyone just kind of stands around and points at each other and says, you go fix it, you go fix it. And so that's obviously not working. So we should be also putting out an RFP within the next 6 months that will describe exactly what we need in terms of a maintenance contract. And whenever that's put out, it'll be public, so you guys are free to look it up. I'll let Bailey know so you guys can see what we're asking for that maintenance contract, because with what will end up being close to 100 chargers, it's just too overwhelming for our internal departments to handle it. Plus, our electricians are not familiar with the chargers, so they don't even feel very comfortable servicing them. I would suggest, if you do go for grant funding, always overestimate your construction costs. It's always better to ask for more and then need less. We have found that there are some capacity issues, and we're having to upgrade transformers, and it can get very expensive very quickly. But if you build that into your grant applications, it gives you a lot more wiggle room to be able to still afford the projects. And kind of how we got to this point, we had a study done, I think back in 2017, to assess the airport and the region in terms of EV growth in the future. And back in 2017, they said by 2020 we would need 125 chargers. So we're still quite behind the curve of what was expected out of that study. So that kind of helped us push our leadership into saying, hey, like, we did this assessment, we're behind the curve, we don't want to be back even further. Although, like I said, getting the giant grant of 64 or 54 chargers at once is a bit daunting, but we'll make it work. Let's see, let me think if there's anything else that I can think of.
So there's a couple questions coming in for you, Zoe. So Andy has asked, can you share the specs for the charging station where you got charge point equipment that you preferred? And are all your chargers level 2, or do you have any other charging types?
So the Tesla chargers in the Terminal D garage are fast chargers. And then we have one fast charger at our headquarters, but all of the other ones are level 2 at this point. And yes, as I'm trying to track down an old copy of our RFP for the charge point equipment. So if I get that, I'll send it. If not, I know we have to write the new one very soon for our new chargers. So I can share that as soon as that's finalized as well. Let's see, other questions. Share info on the assessment mentioned. Yeah, I will also try to track down the study too, so you all can look at it, because it looked at a regional scale too. I think the COG may have a copy of that. I bet Lori has that buried somewhere. And then any issues in
the assessment charging for charging stations at DFW Airport?
Yes.
Huh. Okay.
Maybe somewhere. Lori just popped on if she sounds confused. But
I'll look.
yeah, no, that's okay. That'd be great.
And then issues with installing fast chargers, conduit, higher prices for wiring. It is more expensive, but like I said, it really depends on what you already have nearby. If you're having to upfit a transformer, it's a lot more. The conduit is a little bit bigger, but not terrible. It's really just the capability of the nearest transformer that's our biggest issue. And the charger itself is more expensive. I think the fast chargers are about 20, and the level 2s are, 3 to 5 at the most.
Yeah, so the charging, obviously level 2 versus DC fast, that is something that is significantly different in funding, which is why the Volkswagen settlement separated those two, because obviously a $2,500 incentive for DC Fast is going to do pretty much nothing for it. It's something, but it's not as much as it impacts for level 2. And so it's definitely a different type. And just the need, assessing the need, a lot of people believe that DC Fast is definitely the best because it's faster, and that's what people want. But in actuality, just looking at the locations across where you're anticipating it going, if for 7-8 hours potentially, DC fast charger is not necessary. But if it's somewhere like a convention center, let's say, people are going there all day. But if it's somewhere very quick, right off the highway, where you want people in and out, that bigger investment for the DC fast is definitely something that you should take into consideration. And so looking at the building types, looking at locations, contacting your utilities early on is huge to make sure you guys are making the best decisions on location. And I know Randy was on here with Encore as well, if you want to hop in, but contacting your utility early as possible is probably one of the most important things you can do to have those conversations and get that moving. And that could probably answer a lot of questions that you have based upon just location options that you have been throwing around. But yeah, the cost itself does vary a lot based upon a lot of features you're adding in, location. Is it connected to a newer building, a new construction? That could alleviate a lot of construction and installation costs as well. And so just kind of taking into account a lot of different considerations could impact the cost just significantly. And
yeah.
So
Bailey, Randy, I'm glad right at the end of that you mentioned something I was going to bring up, and I'll underscore it, is it makes all the world of difference if it's new construction versus return construction, and the impact of putting in our wiring infrastructure and deciding where meters are going to go and what size of conductor or transformer. Those almost don't make a difference as we scale them or increase the number of them, et cetera, during new construction. You come back and have to redo that later, and we're talking about concrete and conduit and removing equipment, putting new equipment in. I mean, those things drastically escalate costs. So, you know, a new construction project, we heard almost, I think the same thing was it Emily who was talking about, always ask for more and you can worry about it later for your construction costs. It's kind of the same thing on your service requirements. You know, we know that these things are going to be coming in the next few years. Please, 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 if you have the opportunity in your new construction, put those into your planning.
yeah.
To that point, there is language that's been, or that was proposed at least. I don't know if we know where it landed in new building codes. Bailey, could you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and so the international, I have to pull it up. The new international energy codes has EV readiness. Oh goodness, sorry, I thought my charger was plugged in. I'm getting a battery is running low. So if I cut off really quickly or I'm just bending beneath my desk, that's what I'm doing. But the international energy codes added in language that would basically require new construction to have EV readiness. And so that is one thing that is,
Bailey looks like she froze, so in case we lost her, on the codes language, we can send a link to the proposed language. Whether it actually made it into the final adoption of the IECC or not, I think we're a little fuzzy on. Somebody else may know. But if it did not make it in, the language that was proposed would still be good language for anybody to reference for new construction, and whether it's part of standard code requirements, it would definitely be a best practice. So we'll be regional codes coordinating committee, our environment and development department, to talk about whether that's a recommendation that we make at a regional level. But in the meantime, that is something that we would definitely recommend everybody take a look at. So we can send a link out.
And for the municipalities, so let's say that it doesn't become national code, putting it in as guidance. I mean, if people don't know during the planning process to even think about this, at least as they're going through all of the rest of their platting and zoning requirements for construction, if they bump into this thing and they say, why are we talking about EVs? What are they talking about? Make ready, this, that, and the other. And as guidance from the cities without making it a requirement, people think through that part of the process. And if they realize, oh, this is something I might use, sure, why not? Go ahead and rearrange things. So you don't necessarily have to do it as a standard as opposed to guidance.
Okay, and sorry, you guys, as I was saying it, my power block was apparently off, so really bad time. But yeah, so the EV ready codes could be a really big thing that could help future construction costs and installation costs of all of the stations. But there was another question that I'm trying to bring up here.
Hey.
I believe it was
Bailey's
go ahead,
Kathy.
whoever.
Can I ask Zoe I want to ask Zoe 2 questions. Zoe, this is Kathy Fonville with the City of Mesquite. So you mentioned SemaConnect, and we have been, we got a quote from them for level 2 chargers. Were you not happy with them because of the actual hardware, or is it more of a software issue?
It's more of a software issue.
Okay.
Their system's fairly basic and great, and we found that their customer service was also not as good as ChargePoint.
Man, I'm glad you said that. And then my other question was with ChargePoint. Are you working with ChargePoint directly, or are you working with one of their distributors? Like we've been in touch with Smart Charge America, who primarily sells ChargePoint. Are you just dealing with them directly?
Not really. We have to be careful about showing preference, like to the companies themselves. So we're working with them with our existing chargers in terms of customer service related to that, but any expansion, we really can't until we've selected them for a new project.
Okay.
Yeah, and Zoe, I have one more question just to kind of bring it back to the operation and maintenance thing, just for everyone else to be able to kind of not learn from your mistakes, but kind of avoid. Sorry if I'm. Am I on? Sorry, I was switching from my computer over to my my phone over to my computer. But from the operation and maintenance perspective, you guys gotten the point where your warranty went up, you kind of had to scramble to try to get a new RFP to handle that. What would you suggest for people just getting into the process in order to kind of avoid that kind of secondary step later, to make sure that operation and maintenance is kind of handled from the very get-go?
I would say it's not a huge deal while while your warranty is still there, but I would say as soon as your chargers are installed, put out an RFP for the maintenance contract so that when the warranty expires, that's already ready to go. That would be my biggest piece of advice, because yeah, we're stuck in a weird place where we're having people in our environmental team running out and poking around wires trying to fix chargers, and that's not ideal. So but wait until you know which chargers you're getting, because I think that's also important for the maintenance contract. Like if you're only getting level 1s, or if you're getting level 1s and DC fast chargers, or if you anticipate those in the future, having all of that written into the maintenance contract from the get-go will just make it a lot easier.
I was on a webinar session or a virtual conference session recently, and it was really talking mostly about freight vehicles, but I think this is a good point across the board that when it comes to EVs, EV adoption, EV charging installations, things like that, the economy really is in the scale. So if you are thinking of doing an installation, say you're thinking we're going to crawl, walk, run, we're going to do a few chargers now, and then later we'll add more as there's more demand. If you get a contractor out there, you may want to consider, pulling conduit and doing all of that stuff for your ultimate plan of build out. Like if you're starting with 2 chargers at a convention center with the plan of eventually having 10, go ahead and get all of the electrical and all of the utility side of the work done for all 10, so that later on down the road, all you're doing is paying for the chargers, because then you're only paying to bring the contractor out once. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're planning You know, if you're starting small with a plan to scale up, there may be some economies of scale that you can capture if you go with the ultimate vision on that front end with certain aspects of the project.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Lori. So where any new construction we have right now, we are almost doubling our electricity capacity at the get-go, just for any future energy needs. For example, we're working on new airfield. It's called ARF. There's too many acronyms, but it's basically our DPS unit that goes out onto the airfield, DPS and fire. That we're building some new stations for that, and we're anticipating that we may need chargers for all electric fire trucks in the next 5 to 10 years. And that would be a huge burden on any kind of basic level conduit and transformers that would be put in at the beginning. So we're extremely upsizing our capacity before at design of construction, and not something we want to add in the future. And it's much cheaper to do it that way.
Hey, Lori, this
Yeah,
is. I was just going to say, Lori, this is Melissa Baker with the City of Irving. Your point on, especially if you're trying to do a larger project and you're starting from the very beginning, make sure that you are preparing that conduit and that you are preparing your wiring for maximum build out. So important. We definitely learned that, and that would be one of my top things. The other thing is on maintenance, definitely making sure that you include it in your contract from the get-go that runs the entire length of your contract. We made sure to do that. So for example, when we did our RFP, we included maintenance. I think Emily probably mentioned this before, but the other two really important things when you're doing an RFP. So if you're somebody who's starting from the beginning, or if you're trying to increase your overall project, number one, put yourself options in an RFP. Don't isolate yourself to where you're only asking for, new infrastructure based upon the manufacturer. I would definitely say you need to do options. What we did is we said we were lucky enough to already have our infrastructure through the DOE grant, but we said, okay, number one, how much would it be if you guys are going to just rip everything out and put your new stuff in, and then you're going to do ongoing maintenance and operation on it? How much would it be if you guys are going to come in and just operate on ours, but maintain the maintenance? And obviously that's a problem, because who wants to maintain somebody else's equipment? So we did several different options to see what the market would be. Don't limit your RFP just to one option, and always include your maintenance and operation. The other thing is make sure and work with your legal team. But what we did is we made sure that there was a clause. So if at any point in time we get Volkswagen money or some other type of funding, that we would have the ability to then still work with a separate contractor other than the contractor that we have, if they were not able to produce what we wanted to produce, like let's say a fast charger or another level 2 at a different location. So make sure that your wording in your ultimate agreement, once you're done with your RFP, allows for that type of provision. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you are now limited to one contractor. And a lot of the EV companies obviously want to maintain that relationship only with themselves. So you just need to make sure that you provide wording and work with your legal team so that you can have that option. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point for sure. Definitely. Especially if you're trying to get free chargers and stuff like that. You don't want to get a free charger and then be stuck with something for 5+ years just because it sounded great at the time. But having that longer side of that. I know we're kind of coming up on time, so I wanted to kind of open up the floor for anyone that has had a question that they haven't yet had time to drop. I know we've been talking a lot about what people have currently done, but if there's any more questions on things that we haven't covered, I definitely want to be able to focus on that. Yep, Far has her hand up.
So I do have a question about the contracting vehicle. Like, I was wondering if you were offered any volume discounts. Like at the city of Dallas, we have a really ambitious goal. We plan to put in lots of chargers over an extended period of time. And one contracting option that we've been exploring is going out for an RFP, but for a longer term to kind of lock in that price and not have to do the RFP multiple times for just a few chargers. And then is there an option to build in the maintenance with the same company so that you're purchasing it all at one time and there's not this extra cost? Because I think that was not a positive experience for the city in the past as well, when we've purchased chargers and then they've broken and we couldn't get them fixed economically. So we're just trying to figure out the best purchasing vehicle to make this happen and kind of lock in our price so we'll know what to anticipate and budget for over multiple fiscal years.
Hey, Bailey, this
So
is
just wanted to know.
We can answer some of those questions.
Yeah, no, that's we set up this call so you guys can answer these questions. We would love to answer as well.
So a couple of things on the first one on the agreement, I would always caution you, definitely City of Dallas, to go out for as long as you possibly can. Of course, I understand your council budgets. We do the same thing. You cannot encumber too much. So we understand that for future councils, but I would try to do the most you can if you were to do a 1 year or a 3 year agreement, and then put in there your options for renewals. And so, you know, if you could possibly get a 3 year agreement with options for 1, 2, or 3 possible renewals after each year and option yourself out, I would say that would be the ideal. So then you could come up with a 9 year agreement. Obviously, you know, you need to factor in your budget and what you've already budgeted, but that would be the ideal. The other thing is absolutely make sure that you have maintenance. And when you're doing the RFP process, again, don't limit yourself. Make sure that you're putting in that question to include maintenance. I just don't really think that, you know, there's any other way other than that. We definitely did that because we don't want you know, to have to do that, but you have to factor that into your budget and your overall price, because obviously that's going to make it go up. So, but yes, definitely do that.
Yeah, this is Emily, also at the City of Irving. I totally agree with Melissa. Definitely include maintenance if you can. Like Zoe mentioned, it can be very, you know, a specialty to work on EV chargers, depending especially on which chargers you have. I know our staff, our electrician told me, he was like, I'm so glad we don't have to maintain these because frankly, that would be overwhelming. The part they did have to do is additional conduit, like I mentioned. And if anytime your electrical service goes out in that area, of course, your electricians will have to deal with that because that's on your side. But I'd also recommend making sure you have a plan for installation. That was something, you know, that our company kind of included, and they gave us a whole rundown of how that was going to work. But I've heard that is something else that can get kind of tricky. That's something else that Zoe was mentioning. It can be more than you expect it to be for installation. So make sure to keep that in mind as well.
Mm-hmm. Going on back to
that was really helpful. I also like the model the City of Irving is using, where they don't actually own the chargers and they don't maintain them. They just have an agreement with an outside vendor. And I guess contractually, how is that accomplished? You just have a contract for extended number of years, and then after that you renegotiate or they pull them out?
We have a contract, but I will say, you know, and I want to mention this because we had a leverage point, right? So we had a leverage point because we already owned our system, and system, then yeah, it would be hard to leverage that and use that as a contract negotiation point. But Emily kind of alluded to this before. We had obtained these through a grant, so that's not something we wanted, you know, to have funding for, because we didn't pay for them in the beginning. We got a grant, and so we had that leverage point that we already owned our system. So if you're going out and doing an RFP and you don't own your infrastructure already, it would be hard to have somebody give it to you for free without a grant. So we were starting off at a very good point and could leverage it and say, okay, we already own our system. Why don't you come in here and manage it for us? And so that was our leverage point. So again, if you don't have that, then you're not at that point. But if you do have it, I highly encourage you to negotiate with your contractor that you do through your RFP and say, hey, you know, we already have our infrastructure. How much is it for you to upgrade? Again, upgrade. Make sure you're getting an upgrade up and maintain and operate this, because to Emily's point, you know, our engineers and our electricians were very excited that they weren't maintaining this for us. So I think that's something you just have to factor in.
I have a follow-up question to that. Have any of y'all on the call considered or signed up for the leasing of the equipment rather than purchasing it outright?
I just want to, I know other people might be able to answer it, but this is really important when we're talking about producing an RFP that has several options. We asked for those numbers as a lease option. If they were to come in and completely take out our system and put in another system and we would lease it for them, and we found it highly cost prohibitive. But again, we had our infrastructure in the first place, which is crucial to the whole argument.
So Melissa, when you say you have the infrastructure, that means you owned the chargers, but now you're leasing them?
No, it meant that we owned them through the grant. And so we had the
Right.
opportunity to leverage that ownership and say, we will then allow you to own it and transfer ownership so that we don't have to operate or maintain. So we don't lease
Got
it.
it. So you transferred ownership.
But but we did have, and in the RFP, that was one of the options for our vendors, which is tell us how much it is if we could lease it to you. And it was lease it from you. And it was highly cost prohibitive for us.
Okay. And I haven't looked into it, but since our new 54 chargers are through TERP, I do not think that they will allow it during their reporting period, which is 3 years after commissioning.
Mm-hmm.
So just something to think about if you do end up getting a TERP grant. I think you're still stuck with the provisions of the grant through those 3 initial years after commissioning.
Absolutely. And if you have obtained anything for a grant, make sure you're outside of the reporting period. Always double check that.
Mm-hmm.
Hey Bailey, it's Kathy Fonville. I did want to comment about the TCQ grant money because I'm pretty sure, nod your head, Lori, if this is correct. You have to own the equipment if you get the grant money from TCQ, correct? I think you have to own it. So, and I would also like to say that the $2,500 max is not nearly enough money. I don't know why in the world they're only giving $2,500 because this is very expensive to put in charging stations. I will say that we had a great conversation with Blink. We had 4 people on the call from Blink that were all over the country. They gave us some really good information simply because a lot of the cities that would like to work with Blink here in Texas, Blink is actually going to apply for the money themselves, and they, which may be another option. I mean, as I said, we're still trying to figure out what we want to do. We've talked to ConneConnect, and now that I've heard from Zoe, we probably are going to go away from them. But also ChargePoint keeps coming back. We actually had a site visit with Smart Charge America, who works, again, they mainly sell ChargePoint. And most of the stuff that you've been asking about, Smart Charge America can do on the maintenance side of things too. So we've had a good, like I said, we've had good experience now with Smart Charge America and with Blink. And that's kind of where we're going with and decide what business model we're probably going to end up going with. So anyway, we're still trying to explore the options and see where we end up. But again, it's a lot of money to get into this. So, and I'm thinking too far with City of Dallas. Wow, I wish we probably need to have a conversation next week about where y'all are thinking about going and just all that you need, all the issues you need to resolve.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I'd love to pick your brain. Sounds like you're pretty far down the road.
So I will just make a comment that a few years ago, we put together a call. It was, I believe, Plano, Richardson, Dallas, maybe Allen, because we had heard, in separate conversations from separate cities that there were plans to put charging stations. We're like, you're right along 75 and you're all together. So definitely, if you are looking at putting a charging station close to your city boundary, we would encourage you to contact staff that in your neighboring city and make sure you don't each put a station, 1 mile apart from each other. There may be some collaboration that y'all can do in terms of siting to work smarter, not harder, reduce duplication, things like that. And perhaps cost share.
And building upon that as well, capitalizing on community partners is huge. If you have your city hall directly across the street from a huge business, doesn't necessarily mean city hall has to do it. Maybe talk to your people within your stakeholders and business owners within your community, and they can take advantage of trying to get funding to try to get and operate and maintain. It doesn't have to be all in the back of the city itself to get infrastructure. And so creating those conversations, forwarding over funding information like this Volkswagen money doesn't have to be from a public entity applying for it. It can be anyone. And so making sure you guys are capitalizing on that and making sure your community is aware. So you don't have to put all that work on yourself. And so I think that's
going back to the comment of 2,500 not being near enough, and it always gets down to the location. You can get a Bluetooth enabled, card reading, 4G connected level 2 charger for that much money. It's putting it in a specific spot that's going to cost you the money. So if you've got the flexibility like a city has to decide between one of a number of places, or to look into this issue of, gee, maybe we partner with the business across the street, that's where you're going to be able to save the most money. It can be an order of magnitude more than an order of magnitude more than the cost of the charger itself.
Great point.
So
we're
Randy,
sorry, Marga.
Randy, can you just quickly share, you know, if a city is debating between different locations, what, if any, assistance could they get from Encore? And
just tell us. I mean, we are prepared to say, we went through this, for example, with the folks at DART. You know, we went back and they said, well, we could put a charging station at any of these following places. And we did the analysis of all the different places that they gave to us, and we showed them which ones were, you know, oh, you want it done, we can do it, you know, a couple of weeks from now, and there's no cost to you, versus, oh, you want it there, I'm going to have to charge you a bunch of money, and oh, by the way, you're not going to get it for 4 months or longer. So it takes all the different sorts of calls time. Again, think about it. If you've got the liberty of getting the function in an area, and we'll help you do that analysis if you indeed have multiple places you can put it. If it's a specific site, we can come in there and help you with put it here versus put it there, or during new construction, you know, put multiple services with a meter here and a meter there as opposed to all metered here and conduit out from the same place. We'll field those sorts of questions all day long.
Great. And Nora just sent in another question. Does anyone know of any reliable data for EV owners to better inform decisions on where to install stations? Yes, we have that data in-house through COG that we query out and have and publish to be publicly accessible through a couple different tools for the state of Texas. And so it goes down to the granular level of zip code and then goes all the way out to regional analysis of where EVs are being registered. And so that can definitely be a huge tool to see where are the EVs, but that doesn't necessarily mean, it's actually kind of opposite. Where EVs are living and where they're registered doesn't necessarily mean where the infrastructure has to go. A lot of the times, many people are charging at home. And so you need to install that infrastructure in places where EVs aren't living. And so figuring out, Buzz is excited here. And so trying to figure out and try to fill those gaps in. And so utilizing that data, as well as the Alternative Fuel Data Center has a station locator map. And so being able to look at the existing stations are, who's running them, are there accessibility limitations, things like that, as well as where are the cars living, and then where can you fill in that gap to kind of create that kind of consistent network across the region. As well as outside the region. Honestly, that's probably our biggest issue, is making sure all those kind of periphery cities are setting up infrastructure to kind of allow people to get to the periphery of North Texas, our urbanized area, to get beyond and get to the other cities across the state as well as interstate as well. And so it's definitely a lot of things to take into account, but we spoke a lot about a lot of things today, and I'm very happy we recorded this because we're going to be able to take very comprehensive notes that we can send out to everyone. But with that, I want this to be an open group. Obviously, everyone who attended today was very interested in this topic and had a lot of questions that they wanted answered. And so just kind of keeping the momentum going. Definitely feel free to reach out to COG with any questions. We will be able to try to field that either ourselves or figure out the best peer to be able to kind of help you navigate that. It's definitely something we don't want people to have to feel like they're by themselves and trying to figure out what's going on. And so definitely feel free to reach back out to us. But in the meantime, we will kind of coordinate all of the different topics that we discussed today, as well as a lot of different other resources that could help you in addition to that people have been kind of chatting about and stuff like that. And so we will send all that out very soon. But with that, I guess we'll leave it up to one more. Lori has her hand up.
I just want to ask, because I joined late, but it seemed like there was a lot of discussion. Does the group think that we should do a repeat session of this? Just open discussion?
I think that would be a great idea, so that we can get more of a roundtable input on options that other people are exploring.
Okay, maybe I'm just going to throw out a suggestion, like coming out of New Year's, maybe the end of that first week of January, or should we go with that second week of January? Or is that waiting too long?
I think the second week of January would work for us. Do we have any idea when TCEQ is actually going to make awards on applications they've received?
From just anecdotes with other people that at times it has taken a few months for awards to be processed. But I really don't know.
Okay, well, so we'll set up something for around the second week of January. And in the meantime, we'll put out, like I said, all the notes from this one, but also anything that we didn't cover, please ping us so we can have that as a topic to make sure to cover next round. That's something that we love. We can anticipate what people kind of want to hear and try to anticipate those questions, but having that in advance can help us develop and try to kind of get the best topics so we actually get that covered for you. And so we will get that covered out and then email you guys directly, try to get that on everyone's calendars probably this week. And so in the meantime, I guess, thank you all for getting on. Yeah, we will send a list of attendees and get all this together. And so yeah, I appreciate everyone's enthusiasm and conversation, especially at 9 a.m. Out of Friday though, so that's exciting. But I hope you guys all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bailey. Thanks, Lori.